Hello, everyone. I want to talk about the second exam and what you can do to get ready for it. So, this will occur during the regular scheduled time on the given day. So, we'll talk about the course objectives, the logistics for the exam, a little bit about the focus of each module, and then what you can do to prepare to get ready for it. I'm not going to read through these. The PowerPoint will be on Canvas, so you can see these if you need to there. This is showing how the course objectives relate to the material that we are covering this semester. So you can read through those on your own if you would like to. It's one way of seeing what we're covering. We'll talk as we go through each module a bit more about that. In terms of how much each module is weighted, I'm showing that here. So you can see they're all pretty similar. The ones that maybe are a little bit more are often the modules where, I guess module 7, we had kind of a lot of that you learned in the lab. So it's a bit more for that reason. And then module 10 is just kind of some really important material. Some of that does overlap with both 9 and 11. So just those two maybe a little bit more than some of the others, but all five are pretty equally weighted, close to 20% each. So a little bit about the logistics for this exam. So the exam will become available at the normal start of class time and be available for the regular scheduled period where we would have class. So that's a 3-hour block of time. I will have Zoom open during that time if there are any questions. I will also maybe have my email available, but if I'm answering a question in Zoom, I'm not going to get to the email right away. So either one of those options is fine. Just be aware that if you have a question, a lot of other people might have the same a question at the same time. So that's a 3-hour block of time to take a 90-minute exam. So you can start at the very start of class. You can start a bit later. You get to decide what that looks like, but that's kind of the idea for it. So you'll have a 90-minute period of time in which to take the exam. So once you start, you have to have it done by the time 90 minutes is up. And by done, that means you have both completed everything and uploaded it back to Canvas, because it will basically kind of time out at 90 minutes and you might not be able to do that. So you want to leave a little buffer of time to get that uploaded when you're done. Make sure that what you're uploading is legible and complete. You will need to show your work to get full credit. If you have the right answer but you have not shown your work, you will get very minimal credit. So you have to show how you got to the right answer if you want the full credit for what you're turning in. So again, when you're doing this, you need to upload to Canvas. It has to be either a PDF or a JPEG in order for me to be able to read it. So pick one of those formats. There's a few ways you can do this. If you want to print out the exam, write on it, scan it, and then submit it, that's fine. If you want to write on a separate page and take a picture of that page or probably pages, will probably be more than one. That's fine as well. However, if you do that, make sure it's very clear what question you're on. So make sure I know it's number 1, number 2, etc. As you're going through that. If it is challenging for you, I know this is something that some people had difficulty on the first exam, was figuring out how to do this. How do I upload multiple pages to Canvas? And I know it's possible because a lot of people have been able to do this. What you can do is you can practice this beforehand using the practice exam. So I've set it up in that way so that you don't have a lot of anxiety during the exam about actually being able to turn it in. That's not, there's enough to be anxious about perhaps without that, right? So the idea here is you can upload it to Canvas for practice, something that has multiple pages with the practice exam. So what I want to do, I want to take a minute and go to Canvas and show you what that looks like, so you can find that and do that when it's time. Okay, so here we are in Canvas. So I'm going to scroll all the way down. We're almost done to review for exam number 2. And this might be a bit bigger when you see it, because I'll obviously have this video recorded, and that will probably be on the top spot. But let's go to practice for exam number 2 for now. So you'll see this is listed as an assignment, but it says this assignment does not count toward the final grade. This is for you to practice, right? So the practice exam is right here. So you can click that to open it. And then you can work on it. You can finish it. You can fill out the whole thing. And when you're done, you can go to submit assignment and you can upload it. And so that's where you can get some practice with uploading something that is multiple pages. If you just want to download the whole thing and then re-upload it as your practice, that's fine. The goal here is that you know how to do this before the exam, so you're not anxious about it during the exam. So during the first exam, for some of you, that was a challenge, and we figured out kind of on the fly how to get around that. For the second exam, you need to be able to do that. So this is your chance to make sure you have that done ahead of time. So I will probably, if you do email it to me instead of submitting it through Canvas, there will be a penalty for that. So I would recommend making sure you know how to do this ahead of time so you're able to do it when the exam does count. One additional note I want to make on the practice exam, you will see some multiple choice questions. And as I mentioned on the first exam, we will not have those kind of questions on the exam you're having this semester. However, with the material we're covering here, there are some questions that do lend themselves to making choices like that. So I've written a few questions that are similar to multiple choice, but in a little bit of a different format. So I'm showing you an example of that here. So this is one of the questions on the practice exam. And if I were to rewrite that for the exam you're taking now, this question is not on the exam you're taking now, but I would maybe write it like this. So I'm saying this because there are a couple of questions that are in this format. So it says underline the solution with the fewest ions, circle the solution. Let me start at the start. Circle the solution with the most ions present, and underline the solution with the fewest ions present. Okay, so that's what we're showing here. You would pick between we have 3 different options here. Underline or circle the one with the most, underline the one with the fewest. So you're basically picking 2 things there instead of a multiple choice where you're just picking one thing. So there will be a few questions on the exam that have that format. You're not seeing that format on the practice exam. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up in terms of looking out for that format and knowing what to expect when you see that when it comes up. So that is what I wanted to show you on Canvas. Let's go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so again, you will need to upload your exam as either a PDF or JPEG during that 90-minute block of time. So again, these exams are written as if they were for 75 minutes. And so you have a big buffer there of 15 minutes for technical issues related to downloading, printing, uploading, taking pictures, whatever you need to do to make that work. And again, you will need to be able to upload multiple pages when you submit assignment, and you need to figure out how to do that before the exam. And this part of the review is this chance to practice that. So make sure you're aware of how to do that. And if you have questions, please ask me about those. A couple other things for the logistics in terms of what I'm expecting you to be able to do. Again, this is basically an open book test. If you were taking this test in a classroom, I would be giving you a bunch of this material. So I'm expecting you to have this to look at. So I'm telling you what to be ready to definitely look at, because there will be questions that I'm not saying in the question to go look at these things, but you're not going to be able to answer those questions without looking at these things. So of course the periodic table, you'll be needing to reference that on occasion. There are questions that will ask about solubility rules. The word solubility rule might not be in the question, but you should know when you would need to look those up. Those are on table 7.2, so make sure you have ready access to that. There could be questions about heat of fusion or heat of vaporization. Those are on tables 12.2 and 12.3, so make sure you have ready access to those tables. So those basically 4 resources. There will be questions that you will have to look up potentially in any of those 4, and you need to be able to do that. There are several equations and constants throughout the chapters. You would need to know those as well. So in some cases you might be able to memorize those. In other cases you might have to look those up. And then constants on the back cover of your textbook that you might need. Anything you expect that you will need to have access to, please bookmark that. So when you're taking the exam, you can very easily go and find it. Again, with an open book exam, it's actually more work to study for because you're reminding yourself where to find this information as opposed to me giving it to you as part of the exam. The goal here is not to learn it as you go. If you do that, you're going to run out of time before the 90 minutes is up. So you can get the first 2 pages perfect and the rest of it not done at all if you're trying to learn as you go. You need to know it already, be able to look up what you need to solve specific questions, but not learn as you go. And then of course a calculator, right? So you'll need to have that. So have all of those things, have them ready to go. Things you should not have, again, same as the first exam, other people and internet sources. So those would be considered cheating if you were using either of those. So part of that, again, you'll be signing the honesty pledge as sort of the first page of the exam. And this is so that I know that you know that if you do one of these 2 things, you're going to get in trouble for it. Unfortunately, throughout the country, throughout our college, and even in some of my classes, there have been some students that have not followed these guidelines and gotten in trouble and having to, in some cases, drop courses. Please don't do that. A few things, just so you know, that will be telling me that maybe you haven't done this. And there were, in some cases, a few edge cases earlier that I wasn't quite sure about, but I'm going to be a little bit more on top of the second time around. If you are solving a problem in a way that we did not discuss in this course, obviously you must have found that somewhere else, right? So we have ways of answering questions in a Chemistry 3A course. If you're answering questions as if it was maybe an organic chemistry course, a different 3A course using a different textbook, a physics course, then you're not getting it from this class. So go back and look at all the material we've had. If you're not sure about that, check in with me before the exam if you think, okay, is this okay? But if I'm seeing things that we haven't covered as your way of answering a question, then that to me is telling me that you've looked it up somewhere and you'll get the question wrong and you might get a 0 on the whole exam. So just be aware that that is part of what I'm looking for with this. Also, if I'm seeing the same thing show up that shouldn't be showing up on different exams, that's telling me that maybe people are talking to each other that shouldn't be. And ultimately, this is depriving you of an education if you are doing this, because this course is a prerequisite for something else that when you get there, if you didn't get through this course honestly, you're just not going to be ready for it. You would be better off retaking this course honestly and then taking the next course than basically cheating your way through to get somewhere that you're completely unprepared for. So it's ultimately your choice. I can do a little bit to help along the way. And part of that is you are signing this honesty pledge. And if I find that anyone is not following it correctly, you will get a referral to a dean as well as a 0 on the exam. Okay, so I want to go ahead and go through each of these modules and discuss some of the key points that you will need to know for the exam. So Module 7, there's kind of a lot here, and we went through it pretty quickly. But these are things I think if you go back and look at it a little bit, you should be able to do fine on for the most part. So properties of light. So we're talking about the electromagnetic spectrum, wavelength, frequency, where kind of the different types of light fall on that spectrum. And then from there, we looked at electron configurations and a little bit about how they interact with light. Not too much detail there, but the being able to correctly write electron configurations for any of the elements, periodic trends. So that is related to basically the octet rule. So seeing how within specific groups we have similar properties, be able to write correct Lewis structures of the elements, and using the octet rule to then predict what kinds of reactions will those elements undergo, and then the Lewis structures of molecules. Also shapes and polarities. So we did that in the lab. One thing I want to mention here, you're going to probably have questions for these different sections as separate questions. Sometimes for the homework for this, you might have seen like one question that does all of it together. I want to see each step separately, right? So this is kind of part of where you're showing your work. So you might have a question where you're given a Lewis structure and from that discuss the shape, or you might be given the formula, from the formula find the Lewis structure. But probably not both of those in the same question. Module 8 was about gases, so some of the key ideas here, the kinetic molecular theory, so be able to discuss trends related to that, the different gas properties, so the relationships between those 4 measurable properties. You do not need to know the names of the people who are given credit for those, just know what the properties are, okay? The ideal gas, I'll be able to use that correctly, be able to do calculations with partial pressure, and then stoichiometry based on the ideal gas law. Module 9, we looked at attractive forces. This is the module where we're borrowing from basically 3 different chapters, right? So just be aware of that, remember that. So for the intermolecular forces, know those 3 possibilities. So hydrogen bonds, dipole-dipole forces, and dispersion forces as those possibilities. Also be aware of ionic bonds and metallic bonds. For phase changes, be able to correctly calculate the value of those, also be able to either interpret or draw a heating curve correctly. Solubility rules, we saw those in chapter 7. Be able to use those to predict what will form for a given compound. So given set of ions, will they form a compound or not in solution? And then from that, discuss precipitation reactions. So predict and balance those, as well as correctly write complete and ionic equations. Module 10, we looked at properties of solution in more detail here. For solubility, effects of pressure and temperature on solubility, as well as the properties of electrolytes and non-electrolytes. We had measures of concentration, so we had molarity, and then the percent concentrations could be mass percent, volume percent, etc. The dilution equation is important here as well. So be able to use that calculation, as well as solution stoichiometry. Specifically, titration was the big one we looked at there. Titration is also related to what we see in Module 11, so a big concept you'll definitely have to do a titration calculation. And then finally, for this module, we have the colligative properties, so boiling point elevation, freezing point depression, and osmosis. So be able to rank some of those or discuss some of those in detail. And then finally, module 11, properties of acids and bases, and then the kind of what are some of the characteristic properties that they have. The Bronsted-Lowry definition of acids and bases is referring to the conjugate acid-base concept. So be able to discuss conjugate acids and bases, maybe predict some of that stuff, perform calculations related to the pH concept, and then finally understand the buffer concept in terms of how a buffer works, what kinds of things might make up a buffer, and things of that nature. So those are the 5 modules for this exam. A few last words on how to prepare for this. Make sure you have completed all of the worksheets so far and have mastered all of that material. You will probably see similar questions, similar concepts show up on the exam. Make sure your resources are bookmarked and easily at hand. You know exactly where to find everything you need. Don't learn it as you go. Have it ready to go so you know how to look it up. Take the practice exam. Best way is to treat it like an exam. Set aside 75 minutes. Do it. See what you feel comfortable about. Make sure to practice uploading that to Canvas so that's not a source of anxiety during the exam itself. And then if there are things that you do have questions about still, bring them up on the discussion board. So at any point, so even before you do the practice exam, at any point in this process, if you have questions, you can ask on the discussion board, you can ask a tutor, you can come to office hours. Lots of resources available for you here to help prepare for that. So good luck, everyone. I hope you all do well. And please let me know if you have any questions.